Your presidency, as you know better than anyone, people thought, well, that is it. We're now in a post-racial utopia. Barack Obama's in the White House. We have half black, half white, all black, good times. Let's have a good one. And then people saw that there was still a lot of work to be done. Let's talk a little bit about the movement as you see it. The problem I have with headlines sometimes is like people take things out of context, etc. But some activists criticize you for saying they've got to be careful of snappy slogans, like defund the police, because it loses people. But I wonder, do you think that the slogan is the thing that makes people for or against you? Or do you think people are just going to be for or against you, and then the slogan doesn't really mean as much? And what I mean by that is, like Donald Trump's "Make America Great Again." It's not a very divisive slogan if you look at it on the face of it. That's a great slogan. Why would anyone not want to make America great again? But the subtext said something else. When you're thinking of that, as someone who's great at slogans, by the way, I mean, yes, we can. It's snappy. It worked.
Although, as I said in the book, I actually thought it was corny. I didn't like it that much when my team came up with it. And then they went to ask Michelle, and Michelle said, "No, it's not corny. It's fine." So clearly, she had a better political brain than I did on this. I'm glad you actually brought this up, because what's been fascinating while I've been on this book tour is people have asked me what's my source of optimism, and uniformly what I have said is nothing made me more optimistic during a very difficult year than the activism that we saw in the wake of George Floyd's murder and
right.
Black Lives Matter. And I have consistently believed that their courage, activism, media savvy, strategic resolve far exceeds anything that I could have done at their age, and I think has shifted the conversation in ways that I would not even imagined a couple of years ago. So throughout this slew of compliments, I then said, well, what do you think about the particular slogan, defund the police? And I said, well, that particular slogan, I think the concern is that there may be potential allies out there that you lose, and the issue always is, how do you get enough people to support your cause that you can actually institutionalize it and translate it into laws,
right,
structures, and so forth. There were 2 or 3 writers who I admire who wrote, oh, Obama's making it a mission to chastise Black Lives Matter, and you go, what? Hold on a second. I just spent the whole summer complimenting them. What are you talking about? The reason it caught attention, I suspect, is there were some in the Democratic Party who suggested the reason we didn't do better in the congressional elections this time out was because of this phrase. And I think that people assumed that somehow I was making an argument that that's why we didn't get a bigger Democratic majority. That actually was not the point I was making. I was making a very particular point around if we in fact want to translate the very legitimate belief that how we do policing needs to change. And that if there is, for example, a homeless guy ranting and railing in the middle of the street, sending a mental health worker rather than an armed, untrained police officer to deal with that person might be a better outcome for all of us and make us safer, right? That if we describe that to not just white folks, but let's say Michelle's mom, that makes sense to them. But if we say defund the police, not just white folks, but Michelle's mom might say, if I'm getting robbed, who am I going to call, and is somebody going to show up, right? So the issue here becomes, at any given time, how are we translating and using language not to make people more comfortable, quote unquote, right? Because that's always a strain in historically, right? The concern in these debates is also is often, are we just trying to make white people comfortable rather than speaking truth to power, right? That's the framework we tend to think about these things.
Right, yeah.
The issue to me is not making them comfortable. It is, can we be precise with our language enough that people who might be persuaded around that particular issue to make a particular change that gets a particular result that we want, what's the best way for us to describe that?
So what you're basically saying is we should workshop all of our slogans with Michelle. That's what I hear you saying.
That probably would be wise. It would probably work. But I want to go back to something you said earlier, which I think is really important. And I said this in the wake of some of this criticism. I said, look, part of this is also everybody has different roles to play. An activist, a movement leader, is going to provide a prophetic voice and speak certain truths that somebody who is going to be elected into office will not be able to say. I reread James Baldwin's A Fire Next Time this summer. How is it that something written 50 years ago, 55 years ago, applies directly today, right? Despite everything that's happened. To me, that is as searing and as honest a portrayal of the gaping wound of race in America. But of course, James Baldwin can't be elected to the U.S. Senate, or unlikely that he would want to be the mayor of a city who's responsible for figuring out how do I deal with the police union, right? That's somebody else's role. And all these roles are important. And so, you know.
Why do you think, if I may interrupt, why do you think, though, that Republicans or right-wingers now do that, though? That's something that I've struggled to understand. You see now, even in this election, I mean, some of the Republicans who were running were QAnon supporters, and they were going, we're running, and this is what, and some of them were winning. Some of them are so extreme, and they're winning. And so I sometimes wonder if there's this, is it just a political thing in America where if you're in the Republican Party, you can be completely bombastic in what you believe in, and then as a Democrat, you're trying to toe the line between centrist and left-leaning?
Because I think, in fact, the Republican Party is the minority party in this country. The only reason that it doesn't look like they're the minority party is because of structures like the U.S. Senate and the Electoral College that don't render them the majority party. So they have certain built-in advantages around power, given their population distribution and how our government works. But the truth of the matter is that 60% of the people are occupying what I would consider a more reality-based universe, and those are the constituents we're speaking to, and that is a more diverse group. I describe in the book the first time I go to the Republican House caucus to speak to them, and I think there was an Asian guy or gal and maybe a couple of Hispanics, and that was it. It is much more homogeneous, which means that yes, they have to do less work, but it also means that they can talk to themselves, and as a consequence of the way our democracy, our republic is structured, they don't have to appeal to as broad of a base. That's not fair, but I at least would prefer not having the progressives model ourselves out of or model ourselves on the current Republican Party. That doesn't feel like a good strategy to me to get the outcomes that we want.